Welcome to your deep dive. You're really into Bitcoin, huh? And want to know if November is going to be huge GE.
A lot of people asking that same question.
You even sent over this podcast episode, Bitcoin Bull Run. Will November bring the surge? Catchy title. So it's predicting a massive Bitcoin boom this November. Like the kind that makes everyone wish they'd invested sooner.
Yeah, there's definitely a buzz about November.
And it's not like Bitcoin's just chilling right now either. I mean, last I checked, it was already climbing. But who can even keep up? What's the latest on Mr. Bitcoin?
Right now, Bitcoin is trading at, let me just check, $34,200.
Okay, so what's that translate to? Like how much has it jumped in the past month?
That's a 12% increase in just the last month. That gives you an idea of how volatile things can be in the crypto world.
12% in a month. Man, that's a wild ride. I can see why everyone's talking. This podcast episode seems to think a few things might seriously shake things up for Bitcoin. What's the first big thing they're highlighting?
They start with this whole increased institutional investment thing, which is really interesting. It's like a sign that Bitcoin's growing up or something.
Growing up how?
Well, it used to be all about individual investors, right? Like you and me dabbling in crypto. But now we're talking major players, big institutions getting in on the action.
They did mention some big names like MicroStrategy and Tesla, but are there any other big players jumping in?
Oh, yeah, tons. But one that's really caught everyone's attention is BlackRock.
BlackRock. Okay, now we're talking Wall Street heavy hitters. What are they doing with Bitcoin?
They recently filed for a Bitcoin ETF, and that's a big deal.
Hold on, break that down. ETFs. For those of us who haven't quite wrapped our heads around all the financial jargon.
Sure, so an ETF, or exchange-traded fund, it's basically a way to invest in a basket of assets. Think of it like a pre-made investment portfolio. And in this case, BlackRock wants to create an ETF that tracks the price of Bitcoin.
Okay, and why does that matter so much for Bitcoin?
It could open the floodgates for a whole new wave of investors. Like imagine all those people who've been hesitant to buy Bitcoin directly because it seemed too complicated or risky.
Yeah, I get it. Easier to dip your toes in with an ETF.
Exactly. ETFs make it way simpler to invest in Bitcoin, so more investors means more demand, potentially. And that could push prices up.
So it's not just about the price going up. It's about who's driving that price and what that says about Bitcoin becoming, I don't know, more legit or something.
Right, exactly. It's like a vote of confidence from Wall Street, you know?
Fascinating stuff. All right, what's the next big factor that this podcast episode brings up?
This is the one that always keeps everyone guessing, regulatory developments.
Ugh, yeah. Governments and crypto. Feels like every other day there's a new headline. It's hard to keep up.
Totally. Regulation is a wild card. But the recent executive order on cryptocurrency from the White House, that was actually seen as a good thing, a step towards clarity, which could make those big institutional investors we talked about more comfortable.
Makes sense. More stability, less risk.
Exactly. But then you've got some countries talking about banning crypto altogether. So it's really a mixed bag right now.
Yeah, that's a whole lot of uncertainty for something as volatile as Bitcoin.
Absolutely. And you know what they say about the market and uncertainty?
It doesn't exactly lead to a good night's sleep.
Pretty much. All right. Now, on top of everything else, the podcast also brought up something called a halving. Apparently, it's a big deal.
Yeah, they mentioned it, but to be totally honest, I'm still kind of fuzzy on what that even means. Halving sounds ominous.
Right. So basically, every 4 years or so, the reward that Bitcoin miners get for validating transactions, it gets cut in half.
Hold on. So less reward for the same work.
Basically, yeah. It's all about controlling the supply of Bitcoin, making sure it doesn't get out of control. Think of it like this. Imagine if the rate at which new gold was mined suddenly got cut in half.
Gotcha. The gold that's already out there, it becomes more valuable because it's scarcer.
Exactly. Supply and demand, baby. So this halving, if you combine it with the increasing demand we talked about earlier, well, it could send the price of Bitcoin skyrocketing. At least that's what a lot of people seem to think.
So this halving, it's like throwing fuel on the speculative fire.
You could say that.
So this halving, it's like throwing fuel on the speculative fire. Okay, but beyond all that, this podcast seems obsessed with November. Is there something about November and Bitcoin? Like, is it its favorite month or something?
Well, let's just say November has a history of being interesting for Bitcoin. Whether it's actually special, that's debatable. But the podcast did mention 2020 and 2021, and those were definitely big Novembers for Bitcoin.
Right, some serious price action in those Novembers. What happened?
So in 2020, Bitcoin started November at around $13,000.
Okay, and by the end of the month?
It had shot up to over $19,000.
Wow. Okay, so a good month. But not exactly life-changing.
No, you're right. But then came 2021. That's when things got really crazy. Bitcoin hit its all-time high that year.
Let me guess, in November.
Bingo. Almost $69,000. Right in the middle of November.
Okay, now that's the kind of jump that'll give you whiplash. But, like they always say, past performance doesn't guarantee future results, right?
Exactly. It's tempting to look at those past Novembers and think there's a pattern, but the market's way too unpredictable for that. There's just too many other factors at play.
So should our listeners be betting the farm on Bitcoin this November just because of what happened a couple years ago?
I wouldn't recommend it. History can be a guide, but it's just one piece of the puzzle. You got to look at the bigger picture, institutional investment, regulations, market sentiment, all of it.
And of course, don't forget the golden rule of crypto.
Which is?
Never invest more than you can afford to lose, especially in a market as unpredictable as this one.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, so we've talked about a potential November surge, the factors that could make or break it, and even looked back at Bitcoin's November track record. But this podcast episode, it's laser focused on Bitcoin. Aren't there other cryptocurrencies out there?
Oh yeah, tons. Bitcoin might be the big dog, the one everyone knows, but there's a whole universe of crypto out there. It's constantly growing and changing.
Which can feel overwhelming if you're just starting to learn about crypto. Besides Bitcoin, what are some of the big names people should know about? What else is out there?
Well, you can't talk about crypto without mentioning Ethereum.
Ethereum, yeah, I've heard that name.
Yeah.
But how's it different from Bitcoin? They're both like digital money, right?
Well, they are, but they have different purposes.
Yeah.
Think of Bitcoin as digital gold, a store of value. Ethereum, on the other hand, it's more like a platform.
A platform for what?
For building decentralized applications. dApps, they call them.
dApps. Okay, now you're just messing with me.
No, I'm serious. Think of them like the apps on your phone, but instead of being controlled by a single company like Apple or Google, they run on a decentralized network, a blockchain, just like Bitcoin.
Okay, so what does that actually mean for someone like me? What can you do with these dApps?
Well, one of the biggest things is decentralized finance, DeFi. Imagine being able to lend, borrow, earn interest, all without a traditional bank.
Wait, really?
Yeah, that's DeFi, and it's all powered by these dApps built on platforms like Ethereum.
DeFi. Wow, it's like the Wild West, but with computers.
It's definitely shaking things up. And then you've got NFTs.
NFTs, right. Those are mostly like digital art, yeah. Like those Bored Apes everyone was talking about?
That was a big one early on. But NFTs can actually be anything digital that's one of a kind. Art, music, you name it, even virtual real estate.
It's like we're building a whole other world on top of the internet with its own economy and everything. Crazy.
It's still early days. Like, imagine being around when the internet first started. No one knew what it would become.
So much potential, but also kind of overwhelming. This podcast episode, with its focus on Bitcoin, it's just the tip of the iceberg, huh? What if someone wants to learn more, go beyond Bitcoin? Where should they start?
There's a ton of info out there, but some of it's, well, questionable. Stick with the reputable sources, CoinDesk, Cointelegraph, those are good for news and what's happening in the industry. Investopedia is great if you want clear explanations, like how things work.
Solid advice. And I'm guessing if you're thinking about investing serious money, talk to a financial expert, right?
Always a good idea.
Well, this has been a wild ride.
Yeah.
From a potential Bitcoin boom to like the entire future of finance. My brain's a little fried, honestly.
Don't wait that to take in.
Before we go, any final words of wisdom for our listeners?
Don't be afraid to dive in and explore, but always do your research. This whole world of crypto, it's all about putting the power back in the hands of individuals. The more you know, the more you can be a part of that.
Love that. Knowledge is power, right?
Okay.
Especially in a world that's changing as fast as this one. Huge thanks to our expert for breaking it all down for us, and to you, our listener, for joining us on this deep dive. Keep those brains curious, keep learning, and until next time, happy exploring.